Alright, symbolic responding to a video by SomethingSeaTrashed called Am I Prejudiced Against Muslims? How you doing? I gotta call you Sea-Trashed. How you doing, Sea-Trashed? Great video, huh? It's a complex nexus of issues all in one. I think this kind of comes down to what is the proper use of satire. You know, recently, since the South Park somehow edited their video involving Mohammed, people have seen fit to release on the internet copies of those. I believe it was 12 cartoons, Danish cartoons that have resulted in violence. And under the banner of free speech, they're releasing these. And like any other banner, when people wrap themselves in patriotism, or wrap themselves in a religion, or wrap themselves in some ideal like free speech, you'll find some people genuinely advocating for these things. You'll find other people simply draping themselves in the flag and then venting their prejudices under cover of of these noble ideals. They always say patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. So this is happening too, and people are unleashing all their prejudices. The bottom line, I feel, on those original 12 cartoons is that anybody who's posting those is spreading a subset of those. A subset of those cartoons are what I would consider prejudiced and bigoted, and anybody who is spreading those out is spreading bigotry. Um, Now, they are also buying into just what the extremists want. They want conflict. They want religious conflict. So by promulgating those and by saying, we're not afraid of you, here are these anti-Islam, anti-Muhammad, anti-Islam images, they're simply giving the extremists just what they want. They've been sucked in to religious conflict, which is actually what I think George Bush did. He sucked us into ridiculous wars, in any event, this is the risk there, and they're giving the extremists just what they want, making the West look bad, making it look like there's a clash between cultures when there isn't. There are extremists in every single group. Now, what you don't find is you don't find extremists. You don't find our culture ridiculing extremists from our own culture. This is the risk, because we're dealing with a different culture. There's a risk that particularly if you use the visual art, you are going to caricature or caricaturize, I guess, caricature someone of a different culture or a different ethnicity, and then you border on some form of racism. Though Islam, of course, is not a race, and it has people of every race in it. But the stereotype of Islam is Arabic, and we are in a culture which has a long history of negative stereotypes towards Muslims. And towards Arabs in particular. So that all gets overlaid into the entire thing. What is the proper use of satire? And I'll probably call this video, what is the proper use of satire, or what have you. Satire, parody, travesty, burlesque, sarcasm, irony, they can all be valuable tools or weapons to undermine human folly, human vice, human hypocrisy, particularly hypocrisy on the part of political figures or individuals who have power and are abusing power, or are overly pretentious, or simply take themselves too seriously, are too haughty, and it's good for undermining that. But I would say that the proper use of it is to target if someone must be targeted, an individual, a living individual, not a group. As soon as you target a group, you then start to target innocent victims. And as I say, if that group is of a different ethnicity, we're now in the, especially if it's a caricature like in the visual arts, there's now the making fun of distinctive ethnic features, which then becomes a form of essentially racism, or whatever the equivalent of racism is in the ethnicity. Would it be ethnicism? I'm not sure, but it's a prejudice directed towards ethnicity. So this is the danger. This is the danger here. Um, so I would say the proper target of satire or parody or travesty or burlesque or irony or what have you would be either an individual or an idea. Now this brings us down to so you would want to be parodying an extremist, or if you want to take the small group of extremists and treat extremism, parody extremism, that brings it more down to an individual level. That would be the proper target. Now, of course, you were mentioning that there's an idea, and it's valid, I think, to use these tools against an idea. However, if you put a human figure into the parody, you know, immediately, especially if they're from a different culture, we run into the same problems as before. Philhellenes just did a very interesting video about how enmities can die out between countries. Nations, for instance, can die out relatively quickly. But when an enmity is expressed in written scripture, it tends to live on and be sanctified and to be enshrined in perpetuity, as treated as something eternal, and it's very difficult for that to die out. And this is the danger of scripture. I myself do not believe that religious scripture is the word of a God, or the expression of a will of a God, so I'm immune to that. But the danger is there. Now, Islam in particular, and I am by no means an Islamic scholar. I've read parts of the Quran, I've read about Arabic culture, and I've read about Islamic, I guess you could say, Islamic culture. Um, and I've read from the Western point of view too, as well as some of the Islamic books, but by no means. I mean, I've just barely scratched the surface. You know, the events in the Quran have to be looked at contextually, and you know, of course, you'll hear this from the Christians too, that these things. But the Quran actually has a great deal of context, and the Hadith provide a lot of the context for these things. So to use satire against this means you have to have a deeper, profound understanding of what it is that you're just satirizing. You know, you can't just pick the surface thing. So it actually takes quite a bit of study. You might want to watch my friend Jajabor Returns channel and if you want to have a dialogue with him on Islam, you know, he might be willing to have that, provided it's civil, you know. But he has some good videos. So how do we use satire to attack a religious idea, or to undermine or put into perspective a religious idea that maybe one considers false or dangerous? It's difficult. Religion is one of those areas where people basically have no sense of humor. I mean, or very little sense of humor, unless they're extremely well adjusted, because people have wrapped up these teleological, you know, these ultimate questions of the meaning of life, life after death, this strange longing for immortality that people have. You know, will they rejoin their loved ones when they die? You know, so many of these deeply passionate longings that people have, whether they're rational or not, or whether they're true or not, I don't know. But these are all wrapped up, so people get very, very sensitive. Still, I believe it can be done, but I don't. I believe one should not be placing human figures in there. Attacking the figure of Muhammad, I don't think is valid. Muhammad was one of the most remarkable people in history, most remarkable persons in history. What people have done with him may be another matter, but he himself was a remarkable person in history. I mean, you and I, my friend, come nowhere near nowhere near Mohammed in virtue or in accomplishment. So, I mean, I'll just throw that out there just to put it in perspective. So, in any event, the proper use of satire, I think, is valid to use against an individual or an abstract idea. We shouldn't use it against groups of people, especially against groups from another culture, and we should not caricature people of other cultures. Or their manner of dress or what have you, because we are creating stereotypes and we should not be promulgating these cartoons. I realize you didn't do that, but I'm referring to Kurt Line 3 and some others. We should not be promulgating this bigoted material, wrapping ourselves in the flag of defenders of free speech, because all we're doing is buying into the extremist desire for religious conflict. That's the story, my friend. Bye bye.